Thank you, Anna. We appreciate that so much. And I love Anna. I love her optimism that she thinks we're really just going to have them for 936 weeks. Like we're getting them for like more like 1,400 is probably the average now. That's with millennials. I don't even know what y'all are going to be. But we are so thankful for this blessing, for what it means to do this as a church family, to commit to this as a church family. I also love how Anna kind of subtly slipped in volunteering with children's ministry. Did y'all catch that? So make sure that I'll plug it again. Make sure that you care enough about these kids to volunteer one Sunday. If we all spread it out, then we'll all get to be here and worship, but we'll also get to be a part of that. A couple things to remember again. On right now, we have so much going on when it comes to our opportunities to serve. And I just want to challenge you to make sure you're being a part of that somewhere and somehow. When it comes to Feed the Hunger, there are opportunities there still to sign up to serve. I believe we added a sheet in the back that the Mary Kay table had a few open spots on there. So if you do want to serve on Saturday, and so you may be a part of that group that's serving Friday now, and the Mary Kay group that meets here, that meets here weekly, they have some open spots, so you can do both days. So you're not limited to just Friday. Also, in the combination, when it comes to raising finances for this Feed the Hunger as a whole, and we're not talking about just our tables are taken care of, but there's still needs. So if you're somebody who's talked to me that you just want to give to this, if you want to be a part of Christ Together Katy, of what we're doing as the church in Katy, then talk to me. There's opportunities, or you can just write a check, make that out to Cinco in the memo, Feed the Hunger, and be a part of that. On top of that, our Serve Now Sunday is 2 weeks away. If you look around the building, you see that there are tables set up. You also should have gotten an email this week. I know some of you register online. Some of you are more people that like to sign up in person. So go around, look at these signs. You can look right now. You're not going to bother me or upset me if you do. Look at these signs and places that you can serve. What we've tried to do is pick places that are both for individuals and for families. So very few of these do have some age restrictions, but that was in the email if they did. But beyond that, we want this to be a day on November 27th where we serve together as a family. And then, like we said that day, not meet at 10 o'clock, but we're going to meet back at 5 o'clock for a special worship service where we're going to talk about our day. So make sure that you're doing that. And we also know, like we said last week, that some of you are going to be gone with the holidays. Some of you are going to have extras in. That's great. We want both. We want your extras here. We want your extras serving. They're more than welcome. And also, if you're not going to be able to be here, but you want to be a part of this day, you saw at the bottom of the email, maybe you stopped before them because you're out of town on November 27th, but you can listen now, that we're collecting over the next 2 weeks items for 3 of our organizations, Ballard House, Hope Impacts, and I believe Clothed by Faith is the third. We're going to collect over the next 2 weeks things to help them. Backpacks for Hope Impacts. If you don't know what they do, they provide for the homeless. So they do these backpacks that are packed and ready to go to help them with simple foods, with fruit cups, with deodorant, with toothbrushes. So we're collecting all those things. When it comes to Ballard House, we're collecting paper products. We're collecting snack foods. If you don't know what Ballard House is, they're literally our neighbor. It's an awesome place for us to be able to connect with, being right down the road from them, and they help house people who are being treated for cancer. And so to be able to provide for their pantries for all these places. And so if you can't do anything else, if you can't be here on that Sunday, you're still, of course, everybody will want back here that night. You know you're going to be back in town by 5 o'clock, so don't skip out on worship that night. But back here at 5 o'clock, but bring stuff, and we're going to collect that on stage. You can drop it any day during the week. You don't have to wait until Sunday. What we just did was exciting. It was beautiful. It's something that, as I said, we love to get to do as a church family. We love to get to do as people who have had babies during the last 6 months, to get to dedicate our babies, to think about that, to be reminded of what it means, reminded of what it looks like to do that. But also today is on a national level is Orphan Sunday. And I don't know if you keep up with that. I don't know if you've watched it. But Orphan Sunday is the day that churches around the world take a little bit of time to think about what is on us as churches and what we can do as churches individually to impact the orphan crisis in the United States and in the world. The United States is actually doing better than most, but we have an enormous orphan crisis in the entire world. And I hope that you're already aware of it, and I hope you're already praying about it. But here, just locally, I want you to think about it. Here in the United States, we know as a church that we want to do simple and great things for God. And when James said, pure and undefiled religion is this, to visit the orphans and widows in their needs. It wasn't something that was just glassed over. It wasn't something that's just easy, but something that is a true challenge for us. And we want to be pure religion. We want to be people that are purely Christian. They're doing these things that are simple and sometimes complex and challenging, but in serving our God and listening to what He's calling us to do. And that's to look out for the orphans in their needs. And that's, like I said, sometimes that's in adoption, and sometimes that's in other ways that we can think about as individuals. But I just want to make you aware of what it looks like in the United States right now. In the United States, in the foster care system, and this number may be lower than you expected because it is a lot bigger in a lot of other countries around the world. But we have around 400,000 kids in the foster care system right now. Only around 100,000, a little more, are up for are adoptable. Around 23,000 age out every year, meaning they age out of foster care and are out on their own. And then Texas and California are perennially the two largest states when it comes to foster care. I know our populations are bigger, so that makes sense, but also our problem is bigger. Our need is bigger for what we can do as churches. I want you to think first about that thought of a child aging out. But what that means is that they go through foster care and they get out of the system, and maybe they've had good foster parents, maybe they've had people in and out that have taken good care of them, but at that point, they leave and they're on their own. They're 50% more likely to end up incarcerated at some point if you age out of foster care, if you never are adopted. You want to help our problems as a country as a whole, then get involved in these kind of ways. You know, we sometimes try and stop the bleeding after, and instead of getting to the root of the problem and realize why we're getting cut in the first place, realize why the problem is there. And I want to challenge you as a church to figure out a way, in some way, like I said, it may not be you individually adopted, it may be, but just figure out what it's going to look like for you to have a part in fostering and in orphan care and in reaching out towards those who are marginalized in our society. Let's do our part. Anna just issued a challenge when it came to our working together, when it comes to our biological children, when it comes to our babies that have just been born this year. There's a beautiful scene in the show Parenthood, and I know some of y'all have watched that. In the show Parenthood, where they're going through the adoption process and they're finalizing it, and you know the show, everybody's so close, and they go into the judge's office, and he's sitting there and he's saying Victor, you know, and their parents, and he goes through the legal side of it. But as they are going to finish the process, the grandpa steps up and he kind of stops. And he says, hey, I just want you to know, Victor, that I'm his grandfather. And he goes through and he says some cheesy, funny, sitcom stuff. But he says some heartfelt stuff. And then his aunt and uncle step up, and they go back and forth, and there's this exchange where they all start to say all the things that they're going to do for Victor, all the things that they're going to do to make sure that he knows that he's not just part of their family in name, that he is truly, genuinely part of their family. And as he's getting ready to leave, as the grandpa's the last one walking out the door, the judge says to him, that's a beautiful family you have. And he says, yeah, there's something else. And I want to challenge you this morning when it comes to this, when it comes to helping each other, when it comes to adoption. If we're going to be a family, a church family that adopts, which I think we should be and I think we can be, I think we can truly make an impact. Because for me, when I was studying those numbers, I was expecting them to be a lot bigger. The truth is, as churches in America, we have the opportunity to make it go away, for there to be a non-existent orphan crisis in America, for it to be totally gone if we're the people that are embracing this. But if we're going to do that, to know that, like I said, you may not be the one adopting, but make sure you're the one that's helping. Make sure that you're part of this family, so when somebody brings a child in, when somebody does adopt as a church family, because a lot of us are from different areas of the country and different places and don't have our biological family close by, Make sure that you're the kind of relationships that we're going to say, hey, I'm going to do this. Hey, I'm your uncle. I'm your aunt. I'm your grandfather. I'm going to do these things. We're going to do these things together to make sure we're going to do it and do our part. I believe that we become passionate and compassionate about adoption when we understand our own. When we understand our own. You see, throughout Scripture in the New Testament, there is a common theme when it comes to us being adopted. I love this, and we're just, for time's sake, going to look at one passage really quickly this morning. It's in Romans chapter 8, if you want to turn there. In Romans chapter 8, Paul writes, and he says in verse 14, Romans 8 and verse 14, "For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. The Spirit you received does not make you slaves so that you live in fear again." You know, this is the passage. No longer a slave to fear, for I am a child of God. And when you're thinking about that, and this whole passage is about us being adopted, he says, the spirit that lives in you is not a spirit that takes you back to fear. It's not a spirit of slavery. He's saying it's something so different. I want you to think about that as a child, but also as us as spiritual beings. If you're a spiritual being and you feel like I'm trying to earn this, trying to get in this relationship, and I'm trying to be good enough, you're really constantly living in fear. You're trying to earn it all the time. It's the same thing for a child who doesn't have this family. They feel like everything in their life is just about earning because they have this back and forth relationship with whoever has ever taken care of them. And so this fully connects here when it comes to adopting us as citizens of God. And he says, hey, this spirit that lives in you now, it's not taking you back to slavery. You're not going to live in fear again. Rather, the spirit you receive brought about your adoption to sonship. Brought about your adoption to sonship. See, in this wording here that Paul has in Roman culture and in their country, what he is saying here is that you're adopted into full citizenship as a son in Rome. You know, this isn't halfway. This isn't you kind of belong to us now. It's saying you're adopted to sonship. And as Christians, if you've never felt that way, understand that this is for you this morning. This isn't that we're adopted, that we come to God, and then we're slaves to God. This is the difference in being a slave and that we are now sons. It's full citizens of the kingdom of God. And thinking about this as we were up here this morning and looking at Tripp as we're singing Good, Good Father, I couldn't help but think about with each and every one of my children, and y'all have been there when you're in the hospital room and you look down at this child and you say, you're mine. Now, it's like pretty undeniable with him and me, but you are mine. It's mainly the big head. But you are mine. And I love you. I'm going to take care of you. There's nothing that you can do to change the fact that you're mine. When you're adopted as a child of God, you're adopted into sonship. You're his child. You're his son. You're his daughter. And there's nothing you can do to change that. And by him we cry, Abba, Father. It's a simple verse, a simple wording that is throughout Scripture of Abba, Father, but it's very personal. You know, it's looking at God and saying, Daddy, Father, Papa, Father. Whatever it is that you call it, it's this really intense and emotional connection with God as truly our Father. And then the last part of that verse, the Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs of God, and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his suffering, in order that we may also share in his glory. We're heirs together, good and bad, with Christ. Co-heirs with Christ. We're children of God. My wife, as most of you know, adoption is something that's a big part of our life and a big part of our family. You know, Chelsea, I already had it on my heart. It was funny before we started dating seriously. And really what I knew about her, because when you have that many siblings, and we went to a smaller university, when you hear she was the girl with 20 siblings, you know, that they've adopted 17 kids. And, you know, that kind of defined her. But That's not a bad thing. That's really a beautiful thing. And what I want to tell you, if this is something that you're thinking about and you're in the early stages of thinking about, you don't have to adopt 17, okay? That's not what I'm issuing. Maybe one of you will. But while my in-laws are extremely special people, there's nothing extra special about who they are. They truly are simply people who said yes. They're people who, when God put something on their heart and placed the opportunity in front of them, they said yes. At times when it made financial sense and at times when it didn't, I'm going to be honest, times when it didn't at all. And they've always been totally taken care of. One of my best friends adopted a year ago now through a really cool organization. If you are thinking about adoption, you can look it up, called Both Hands, where it helps an orphan and a widow. Is who they use to fund theirs. But I saw in this thinking, with it being Orphan Sunday, I saw her post this week, and she said, if it's put on your heart, it's because somebody put it there. And I just want to challenge you to answer that. If it's something, and this may be adoption, it may be something else that you're battling with, that you're struggling with spiritually, if it's on your heart, realize that God might have put it there, that God put it there for a reason. And you need to start praying through that, and you need to start seeing through that and see what it's going to look like in your life, because it's been put there for a reason. There's a lot of things with my relationship, with our marriage, that Chelsea shared with me over the years that she's gotten out. I was able, last year, her mother was speaking at a church about her experience with adoption, and when she was getting prepared to do that, they wanted to share a video from Chelsea. And so I cut a quick video, and I've kind of interviewed and guided her through making that. You can watch it. I'll send it out. Maybe I'll post it today. Because beautiful words from Chelsea about what she's learned from her mother about hospitality and what that looks like as a Christian, period, but also hospitality through adoption. And there are a couple things that I was looking back over that script and thinking about this week that correlate between adoption and correlate between us as a church. And that's that there's a lot more, these are from Chelsea, there's a lot more to it, and this is to life, than blood or skin color. It doesn't matter your background, if you're rich, if you're poor, again, the color of your skin, or even this, and it stuck out to me, or even the name on your birth certificate. There are things that we get lost and things we allow to define us in our country. They're not the things we want to be defined by. The things that we can be special in as a church and we can set a standard in. Realize that we're not defined by those things. And when it comes to adoption, we're not defined by those things. When it comes to being adopted into Christ, we're not defined by those things. It doesn't matter where you're from, what your ethnicity is. It doesn't matter if you're rich, if you're poor, if you're from success, if you're from somebody who's just hit the very rock bottom. It doesn't matter. That's not what defines us, because we serve a God who redeems us and renames us. We serve a God of second chances. A God that looks at us as aimless people, as people that we would look at and we'd say we're worthless. There is nothing we can do to earn this. Is there nothing we can do to deserve this? And he gives us a new name. And there's so much connection there when it comes to adoption. We can look at a child without hope, a child that's going to be lost in the system. We can give them a new name. Now, I want to challenge as a church to pray through this, to look at it this year, to care for the marginalized. You know, we're talking about orphans today, but that's across the board. For us to be a group of people who truly do this. When we look at somebody in society, in the United States, in culture, whatever it is that's being held back, that's being held down, that's being helpless, that we're the people that make sure and do something about it. I want to give a specific challenge to you this year, and that's that we'll do this again next year. And I want to challenge you that, and I believe in this, and I'm going to pray for it daily, and I hope you will too. And I say this because I know there are people here who have this on their heart already. But that a year from now, there will be at least, at Cinco Ranch, at least 5 families who are somewhere in this process. At least. I'm talking about new families. I know we have some beautiful families who have gone through it in the last year and who are going through it now. But 5 families. So doable. because there are 5 families right now, probably more, who are already thinking it right now, who already have it on your heart, who already want to do this. And that's why I say, in the process, you may be by this time next year ready to start, and you may be by this time next year ready to finish. Whatever it is, to realize that you can do something about this. Not just that you can. We look at politics, and you probably looked at it a lot this week. I've tried not to. And the same thing as a church. Let's be a people that are people of healing, people praying together, people talking openly and not bashing each other and never attacking each other, and people being able to talk to each other, truly love on each other through our disagreements. But also to realize that when I look at this about politics, when I look at the presidential race, a lot of our decisions were made on moral issues. And what I want to challenge you to be about is, as Christians, to be the ones making the difference, not put it on our government. When it comes to the orphans, I heard this statement. It was a guy who said it changed his whole mindset when it came to orphans. Was he went to a pro-life rally in D.C., and he said it was a lot of people, and there were people on both sides, and it was a lot of yelling back and forth. And the guy across from him said, "What are you going to do if they have all these babies? Who's going to adopt them?" And he said it rocked him to his core, and it really changed his whole life path when it came to his focus on taking care of the orphans. And that's on us. We're passionate about pro-life, about making sure babies are born safely. Let's make sure that they're not just born safely, but they live safely. And when they're born, they're not going into a system, they're going into our homes. They're going to be taken care of. You can't change everything, you can't adopt every baby. If it was so, my mother-in-law would have already. But you can do something. Probably the most powerful thing in that interview that I did with Chelsea about a year ago was that I asked her about what she'd learned from her mom. And she said, it's the value of one. The value of one. And we did Luke 15 a couple weeks ago, and we focused on the prodigal son. But the first parable that he mentions is the lost sheep. And thinking about the value of one, we don't always get that, of leaving everybody else, and they're left safely behind, but in going after, and we're honestly more 99 people. We don't do a great job of going after the one. That the way that her parents have done this is truly caring about the person that's right in front of them, the opportunity that's right in front of them right then. You don't have to do every single thing by yourself, but you can do what you can with the opportunity that's in front of you right now. If you have any needs this morning, we want to give you an opportunity to take care of that. If you need to give your life fully over to Christ and you've been thinking about this for a long time, we would love to baptize you this Sunday. But if you have prayers for anything at all, small, big, something that you need to do up here, something you need to do back there, we'd love to sit down and to pray with you. If you have any needs at all, would you come as we stand and worship?